Hello, my name is Michael Reese. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be hosting a number of interviews with some knowledgeable individuals that have a variety of experiences in music and education, hoping to learn a lot and hopefully cover some of the most important topics in the 21st century, both for educators and just music programs. Today, we're talking to Matt Hahn about his work as a show designer for various marching groups, both indoors and out. We are living in an era where the cost of a single marching band show can easily cost tens of thousands of dollars, at least over $10,000, require a whole team of professionals that do this for a living. So Matt is here to give us a little insight into that process, the work he does, and how that has changed over time. So Matt, thank you for talking to us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. I appreciate it. My name is Matt. I am from the Dayton, Ohio area. I am a show designer, like Michael said, for both marching band and indoor drumline and drum corps. So kind of like all three of the like pageantry arts seasons across the year. I started doing this about 10, 11 years ago, right into the recession, like when there were no band director jobs. I actually got my degree as a band director. Um, Went to music school, music education, all that, went through, certified, all that, trying to be a band director, not really any jobs. And I just kind of started doing this a little bit here and there, and it just kind of exploded into a career, and it's been amazing and really rewarding. I was in marching band and indoor drumline in high school through concert band. I loved all of concert band and all of that as a young sixth grader through my college years. And it's always been kind of like a dream of mine to do this for a living, and I always loved teaching throughout, so it's always kind of been like part of why I did this, because it wasn't exactly teaching, but it was like also able to still kind of help out and help grow programs and groups. So uh but yeah, I mean, I think, other than that, I've got a wife and two kids and a dog, and we have enjoy family stuff. But like, I basically I'm busy doing this most of the year. I like sports and stuff like that, but like, I'm mostly just focused on design and growing my business and all that good stuff, helping groups out.
Yeah. When did you think this might be something you want to do? You said it was always something you enjoyed, but when was that moment where you're like,
Yeah,
I think I want to do this as a job?
it's funny because like a lot of people that want to do it, like know pretty early on, and I don't know that I had that necessarily. Like even throughout college, like I didn't really do. I think I did, like I wrote for like one show where I was doing like a couple of little things here and there, like just as very supplemental, like for a few friends groups. And like it was definitely not ever something that I was like, this is going to be something that I want to build. Like it was always kind of like a, oh sure, like I'll do that. Like a friend would ask me, or like I would, someone would basically just ask me if I wanted to do it, and I'd be like, sure, that sounds good, I'll do that. And it was, like it was never really like about the money. It was mostly just like about helping people out. And then kind of when it was like the indoor season of 2012 was like when I started to really like kind of like I got really big. It was like I got really serious with one group, and then that group did really, really well. And then it kind of like I kind of started, like I said, like, I was looking for band director jobs and nothing was really materializing. And I was substitute teaching a little bit. My wife is a kindergarten teacher, so she was getting me all kinds of gigs in primary school, which was always fun, like doing, third, fourth, and fifth grade substitute teaching, which was, a blast, but like, it was good to just like do. But then teaching marching band, teaching indoor drumline, looking for gig, like trying to stay involved with programs to try to like build relationships to eventually get a band director job. I just kind of started accumulating clients, and I, was looking for a source of income, and that became something, and it just kind of blew up. And then I eventually just stopped looking for band director jobs and kept doing this, and it stayed large enough for me to, have a full-time gig that's lucrative, so which is great. It was always something that I like kind of tapped into my creativity. And I like my mom is a graphic designer, and I know that like there's creativity like within that. Like I've I felt that like in myself sometimes, but like I never really like allowed it to materialize, and now it can kind of like become part of my work, which is very cool. And like, not that you can't be creative as a band director, but like, like the actual creation of something as a like, a component of someone's, the design element is very cool to me. And like programming and conceptualizing things and building that. And it, you know, it kind of became like a love that I never really knew that I was going to have, like, so, which is cool. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say probably like 2015, 2016, like 3 or 4 years in was like, okay, this is my job now. Like, I'm not a band director. I'm not going to look for band director jobs anymore. This is my job now.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's funny hearing you talk about some of that. Something that's come up in a few conversations is just like the gig economy of music teaching, where it's like I teach a little bit here and I write a little bit here, and I also do this other unrelated thing, and
Oh yeah.
eventually, fingers crossed, it turns into like one big thing that you do. But it
Yeah.
seems like a lot of people have those stories of I was doing six things all at once, and that's
Yeah.
how
And
my
like
music career started.
right. And it's like, some of it is a colleague of mine like once put it like, you're kind of you're as a gigging musician, whether you're designing or teaching or whatever, like, or all of it combined together, playing, like all of those kind of things, like you're kind of, it's a little bit unique because you're basically like it's like very primal, where you're like hunting for your food. Like every single thing is part of your like if you lose one of those things, like that's a hard, you have to fill it in. And so you're kind of like hunting every single day, week, month for the next gig to fill in the thing, because like things can come and go, and it's natural. And like design teams come and go, and there's not a single season that goes by where I have the exact same clients no matter what, and whether that's my choice or their choice, or it's just, it's part of the gig. So you're always trying to like find the next thing, try to make sure that you fill that in. Like you're always kind of like seeking that. And that's kind of an interesting just component of it, where like, not that that's not the case for certain gigs, but like, as a band director, you're not necessarily thinking in terms of that, like you're trying to get better and you're trying to, professionally develop yourself, but like, it's not the same exact kind of process. Where so like it's just an interesting kind of it's exciting, it makes it a little bit more exciting and fun, but it's also, adds a little bit of stress, where every gig that you lose or that doesn't go the way that you wanted to is like, ooh, okay, well, I got to make sure that you got to make sure that I fill that in with something else. But yeah, I mean, like it's definitely a unique kind of a job.
Okay. Well, that's a good segue. Tell us a little bit about your first kind of arranging, designing opportunities. You mentioned they kind of piecemeal there in the beginning, and how did those opportunities come about? What did they look like?
Yeah, I had a couple of little things along the way, and it was, I can't remember if it was like I was approaching people to do it, or like I was getting approached to do it, or like I was like, I think the very very first thing I wrote for like a group was well, I started doing, like, when I was teaching, like I was teaching pretty high level marching band in this area. I was teaching at Centerville High School, and like I would write a lot of like ensemble tunes for them. And that was like my very first kind of step in like taking something that I, like either like a pop tune or like a classical piece of music, and like my very first kinds of like real world, like putting it on the page, listening to an ensemble play it, reacting to what it sounds like, what I think it should sound like in my head, what I think it sounds like in the file, and then like what it actually sounds like in with real people playing it, like with player deficiencies and all of that good stuff. Even if I was like the main teacher, like there's still, like there's still discrepancies, and there's still things that I'm like, oh man, like that doesn't sound the way it should on the file, etc. So I was doing that in like, you know, when I was in college, like, 2005, 2006 range. And I kind of started with that. And then when I first started getting gigs, like I was out of college, and I was kind of, I was running a group, and it just kind of, it it kind of like grew from there. I kind of took the mentality of like, and I didn't really know this at the first part, but like I kind of looking back on it realized now that like starting with a group, making that group really, really good, being very involved with that group, writing for that group, watching them grow, watching them see success competitively because of my design, but also because of my influence, was like a huge component of my initial success, I think, like, or at least like success, like growing my client base, like going from 1 to 3 to 7 to 12 or whatever, like per season, was really based on some word of mouth, some of my friends that happened to be like, like we were all kind of the same age, and like they were band directors or percussion directors, and I was, not, or whatever, like I was doing this. Like it just kind of became an opportunity for me to rely on my network a little bit, but then also word of mouth was probably the most important thing. Like what, like, people watching the success of your group, and then, reaching out to you and watching that kind of grow, was really kind of the catalyst, I think, for me of like my growth as a designer. But yeah, it was definitely like being involved with a program and growing it, trying to grow it as fast as possible, trying to grow, both as a teacher, like the main front ensemble person, throughout the time there, and then growing into show designer, growing into like really even big picture, like show, like big picture conceptual things, and like just being really involved and watching it grow. Like that was like a huge kind of like catalyst, I think, for me, for like continuing on and making it something that was sustainable.
Right. Yeah. So that early laboratory was kind of important, and it kind of
Yeah.
turned into a billboard, turned
Yeah.
into like a marketing for you. Um,
Big time.
nice. So, something like really specific. What is the system you're running currently that you produce your books on?
I am on Sibelius, and I run like the most up-to-date version of that. Like I have the subscription plan, and I like that mostly because like I always just get access to the most up-to-date versions of things, and um it just keeps me like constantly like, not like cutting edge, but just making sure that like my system doesn't have any sort of like um uh I guess like it doesn't have anything that's like a deficiency, and like within reason. Like sometimes I don't always update to like the most up to date, because sometimes it doesn't play nicely with some of the other things. But like for the most part, like it's the most, it's the most up to date Sibelius. I run VDL with that as well, and that's through a contact library that just gives me all the excellent marching percussion sounds. When I export any sort of like wind sounds, I use Note Performer 3, and that's a great library for like pretty easy kind of like plug and play stuff. I have a system through that because like I have to like delay it a little bit, or like export only like but like I end up like, getting the sounds from that and like making a really, really nice MP3 through that library. And then I wire Sibelius and VDL through Mainstage to create for clients a fully produced Mainstage file with samples and synth sounds tailored to like their specific setup, whether that's one synth, two synths, 88 key, 61 key, like etc. Like, every kind of group is different. 3 synths, mallet station, like whatever kind of components there are. And then the client gets the Mainstage file, and it's just, plug and play with a couple of little things, and it's a pretty like streamlined process, which is nice. So I do some mixing within Logic as well. Like sometimes I'll bounce files together and like mix them in Logic just to make sure that it's like, completely dialed in if I'm trying to make a really nice like mock-up, really nice MP3, especially if I want to like use it for my website that I house a lot of like prepackaged shows on and stuff like that. Like I just want to make sure that I like have at least, like relatively solid sounding MP3s and stuff that I use. So I have a pretty vast sample library as well that I use to do sound design. Um, Probably like 15 or 20 separate libraries that I've accumulated along the way. It ends at, like, if you think about like the grand total of it, it's pretty expensive, but like, like a lot of them, you can find deals, like at, like right now there's like usually Black Friday, there's a bunch of deals that come out, and or just like here and there along the way, like some, they want to try to like incentivize you to so like, you can find some of those deals. But yeah, pretty solid sample library to just mix and match from, with a bunch of different sounds and um a bunch of unique things that I like, and that like just give me some variety for some sound design stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think that's important. I think sometimes those sounds get maybe overlooked a little bit, because they seem like a frill, but for you, that's like helps you like I guess demonstrate to your clients that they're getting a good product.
Mm-hmm.
And then just like on the band director side of things, or like on the talking about a drum corps when there's 75 people on staff, having something that's like it's supposed to sound like this,
Yeah,
um, is pretty helpful for just like getting people on the same page.
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really instructive for band directors too. Like I usually try really hard to make sure that if the wind and the percussion is like in those two libraries, that like the synth sound exactly like, at least like to a point that like is really good sounding, and then you can reference the MP3 as a jumping off point for like, okay, if I sit back and listen to the band in reality, does it sound like this? You know what I mean? And that's kind of the idea, is like, I want it to sound like this. It should sound like this. These are the components. And like, maybe the winds don't sound exactly like the note performer winds, but like in terms of like sound design and percussion and synth balance, like those things should sound a lot like this, because we took the time to make sure that that was the case.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you are a 19-year-old college student looking to invest in some of this equipment, what are the bare essentials? What are the things you should prioritize?
um oh, I forgot to say, I am running all of that on a Mac Mini, an M1 Mac Mini, that I have, like, and then monitors in my office with a MIDI keyboard. So I would say, like, when I first started out, I was on a laptop because it was what I had for school, and when I graduated, I just kind of had my laptop that I had during school, and it was totally fine. Like, if you're just doing, if you're not digging into the sound design stuff, like, even if you are, like, honestly, like when I started doing all the sound design stuff, like I bought Logic, um and it was $200, and like, I know for like a college student that can kind of be a lot. um Sometimes you can get it built into your Mac too, and it may be the same price, but you can kind of like do it all in one. But like, you can do a lot with just the basic Logic sound libraries. Like, I didn't buy my first sample library until uh well into my design career, mostly because I was able to always kind of get by with what I was doing, and like, I spent a lot of time digging into Logic, and that was one of the things that like I felt was um really helpful about like the beginning process for me, is that like, I didn't start out with 12 clients each season. I didn't start out with 20 clients each season or more. Like, I started out with like usually one or two or three. And that gave me, because like at the beginning I was really slow. I was really slow learning the program, really slow navigating. Like, I spent a lot of time trying to just like figure out what I wanted, and like how the program could do that for me, either whether that was Sibelius or Mainstage or Logic. Like, it just took me a little bit to just kind of like develop all of my shortcuts in Sibelius, and all of my layout and all of that stuff, like, just to make sure that like I knew what I wanted to see and what I wanted to hear. And like, it just took me a little bit of time to figure that out, and that was a lot of my hang up. Like, it, and I know that's not always the same for everyone, like, but for me, like, it was mostly like how to get my ideas onto the page versus like having the ideas. Sometimes it is having the ideas. You can get creative and you can get, writer's block, or, creative block or whatever. But at the same time, like, like, I I had more problems with just like figuring out the program. And the more I did it, the faster I was, the more projects I did, the faster I got, and the more I learned. Like, okay, like I spent a lot of time doing very like minor things, and I was like, why am I doing this? So I started creating more templates, started creating more like you can create like like uh uh template things within Sibelius to like apply to files, and like I started just getting my process a little bit more smooth, and that really helped me like speed things along. So I would say like, if you have it, Sibelius works on PC also. Like you don't need a Mac to do Sibelius, but you need a Mac to do Logic and Mainstage. You can do a similar program, like any sort of like DAW, which is a digital audio workstation, workstation. I can't remember what it is. But like there's a lot that you can do on, like you can do Ableton or Pro Tools or things like that on PC. But to get Mainstage and Logic, you have to have a Mac. So for me, that was easy because I've been a Mac person my entire life. Like even when it was super not cool. Like my mom, we had a like a I think it was a M3 or something 3. I can't remember exactly. G3. It was, all my friends were playing sweet computer games, and when this is like 98 or 97 or whatever, and there were no computer games for Mac back then. Like it was lame, and nobody, everyone was playing Doom and all these awesome cool games, and all I wanted to do was play them. But anyway, so I was able to kind of like, it was really easy for me to just like keep doing the Mac thing because it became cool, and it became, and then Logic and Mainstage became pretty standard kind of useful programs. So that, Mainstage is pretty inexpensive. It's only $30 on the App Store, but like it obviously like needs to run on a pretty the sophisticated Mac computer, which is like part of the components of it. So but yeah, like that for me, like that's, if you can get Sibelius and Mainstage, you can do a lot. And Logic, like if you can get those three, like you can do almost anything that you want. You don't necessarily need, like some designers that I know that have, incredible client lists that like write for extremely successful bands all throughout the country, BOA finalists, Texas UIL finalists, all of these, they write with like the stock Sibelius sounds, so like you sometimes you don't need that, like you can, but like sometimes people get really caught up in like all of the stuff, all of the tools, all of the toys, and all of the gadgets, when like it's really about like a lot more of this is about like, the way that you interact with clients, that has a lot more to do with like how successful or not successful you are in this business, way more so than like how good your mock-ups sound. Like I try to do both, just to try to like make sure. But like for me, like, I don't spend so much time on that stuff that I like, it bogs me down, because I need to be efficient, because I have a lot of clients, and I have, a family, and I don't have endless amounts of time during the day to be like working on stuff. So like I spend plenty of time doing that, but like, I'm always trying to be efficient, and making sure that I'm prioritizing the things that I think are most important. But back to your original question, if you're a 19-year-old college student and you're just trying to start out, I mean, you can get by with just Sibelius. Sibelius and Mainstage would be great. The sound design thing is more about Logic. Like you can do it all. You can do like the arranging stuff with Sibelius and Mainstage, and you'll be fine. So
Yeah, great. Um, yeah, so I like hearing that, like my takeaway is, one, make sure you're getting the most out of any program you're using.
yeah,
Kind of make it work for you. Um, and two, all that stuff is going to be really important, but do good work, and you
yeah,
can kind of piece it in there, and as you're able to, and it kind of depends on what you're doing. So if you're mostly doing the writing, it's Sibelius and Mainstage. If you're doing
yep,
some more sound design stuff, then Logic is something you're going to want to look at eventually, and
yeah,
all that stuff only or exclusively works better on a Mac. So
yep, yeah. The Logic and Mainstage stuff only works on a Mac. It's like Mac native. It doesn't. like the programs like just don't exist for other computers. And I know a lot of people that use Finale also, and it works really well. I know Finale and VDO work together, but like Finale on a Mac and Mainstage don't connect together the same way that Sibelius does. So like there is like an advantage for me for using Sibelius, just because like I can do the connective like Sibelius into Mainstage, and I can play the file with like I can play my Sibelius file with all the VDL sounds, with all the Mainstage sounds happening like all at the same time, and then I can export all of that, and it helps me through the process be able to hear kind of like what I really want it to sound like, rather than like using stock sounds. And for a while, honestly, I used stock sounds. I used the piano and strings and harp and stuff like that are just kind of built into Sibelius, and that was totally fine. I mean, like I don't think I really started like wiring Sibelius up with Mainstage until it was around it became Mainstage got some updates, and it became more reliable. But like, I mean, probably 6 years into my career, I was still just using stock sounds. So like a lot of good work can be done with like the sounds that exist just within Sibelius. Um, and then getting to know the program is huge.
Great. So kind of steering away from that a little bit
Mhm.
into to really the meat of what I think I want to talk to you about, and I think one of the most unique things about what you do is you write for a really broad range of groups.
I
So
do.
I think you write for looking a quick plug, looking at their resonant music design client list.
Yep.
Um, there is a broad range. There's a number of like smaller groups. There's some like very large groups. All kinds of different circuits, all kinds of different um, like goals. Some people are like trying to win it all. Some people like want to be the best they've ever been. Um, how do you balance that, and how do you go from one group to the next with like a wide range of expectations?
Yeah, it's one of I think for me one of my favorite parts of doing this is being able to work with a bunch of different groups, and like you said, like everyone's kind of got different goals and different band sizes and different and some of that's about regions of the country. Like like I live in Ohio, and I started out like really kind of cutting my teeth with like teaching Ohio groups, and like there are a few large groups, but there's a lot of really small groups, and there's a lot of like groups that struggle to like feel really large compared to some groups with 200 plus kids in the band. Like, so I was able to really, I think for me it was easier for me to start like really working with the smaller groups and figuring out how to try to make them sound really really good and big and full as much as possible, like especially like when I'm doing the wind stuff, like that's been the hardest. I think if I started with like all big groups, I think it'll be really hard to transition to really small groups, because it's limiting too. Like you want to make them sound as clear as possible, because every single member contributes to like so much more of the percentage of the sound, just because you have to, like if you've got 40 kids in your wind section, like every single one of those kids need to be like producing sound, or you're not going to sound very like that kind of, or like if you're a small percussion section, like we have to be really good, or you can't hide, like there's not a lot of that. So for me that was like really helpful to be able to like really design a lot at that level first, before I really started to like design for bigger groups that were like had a little bit more. And so like for me, like I carry a lot of those same principles into those bigger groups, mostly because I think that they're effective, and it still keeps the product effective, and it keeps trying to not complicate it with too many different moving parts and too many like multi-layered things. Like those things just don't sound good with small bands, and frankly they're harder to make really effective for even medium and large bands, like unless they are like all excellent musicians, which is sometimes hard to find in a high school group. Like even the best of the best, like there's still freshmen that may not really like know their instrument fully and all that. So like I think for me that was always like that was really helpful, was was taking those principles that I kind of felt like I learned at the smaller bands and kind of like applying them throughout some of those bigger bands, especially within the marching band setting. I like that challenge a lot. I really enjoy writing for a bunch of different groups, mostly because it's fun for me to watch them enjoy the products. It's fun for me to help them get better, as a group and find that success from an educational standpoint. And I think it's, rooted in that for a lot of what I do is really I really am trying to keep things like as educational as possible. And I think that, that method of mine, I feel like helps the education become the number one goal and not like, just working on the design. Like it's all kind of like based on that. So for me, I enjoy that a lot.
Right. How do you kind of tailor it to each group and make sure that it's reflective of what they need? I don't do arranging. Like I've done very little design. Um, like I know even as a teacher, it is can be difficult to like I have all this information I want to give to you. But like giving them the right information, giving them the relevant information, and I assume it's similar for arranging, where it's like I know all these skill sets I can use. I know all these things that sound cool. Um, how do you know like when to pull back, when to put those things in? What is going to be the right balance for each group?
Yeah, it's hard. I really try to get as much detail as possible from percussion directors and band directors, and depending on like what kind of program, like if I'm doing like the entire music package or just the percussion or just the front ensemble or whatever that may be, like I try to like get as much detailed information about the student's level as possible. And a lot of my clients are comfortable using either like, especially for like the WGI side of things, indoor, they use the WGI classification of A, open world, and that helps them like, A is beginner or basic, open is intermediate, world is expert, or like, grade 1 through 5 or whatever. Like that's also helpful too. Like just being able to get a scale of like these students are really successful and these students are not very successful. Like they can't handle this or they can handle that. And that helps me um understand them a little bit better, because like that's the challenge, is that like I won't know them nearly as well as the teachers will, but I think that like I have a good grasp of holistically some things that I tried to do in terms of skill sets. But like you're right, it's hard to balance sometimes. Like it's hard to balance sometimes, like, hey, like what's too much demand, what's not enough demand. And I think it's also hard within the process. Like if I deliver an opener and I feel like it's like pretty medium in terms of like what's going to push the students, like it's not easy, but it's not like really, really hard. And then a band director comes back at me, it's like, hey, we need it way harder or something. I always try to like run that through a filter of like, maybe. Like not that I'm not going to listen, but like maybe you do. This is still like, you've heard it for a week and we're going to put, another 4 minutes of music on rushed up to the school year. Like, so do you really need more of that, or do you just want more music? You know what I mean? Like we can add a few things here and there and like, get specific with some specific skill sets. Maybe we see a little bit more of like more 16th notes in this one, or a little bit more formal, but like, you know, is it really should it really be drastically harder or drastically easier? Like sometimes it's hard to run that filter, because I made those mistakes a lot when I was younger. Like band director would come to me and be like, okay, we need it way harder. So I would like write it way harder. And then like, it would be it would obviously be like way harder for students to learn. And then it wouldn't get as clean. And then like, you would see the difference between the two parts with like, their level. And then just cumulatively over the course of the season, like, that demand stacks up. Like you may get the opener and it's like those 2 minutes aren't going to fulfill the skill set needs through the course, but like there's still 2 more chunks of show, and throughout that we can get there. But like, if you go too crazy, like it can go the other way, where then they're drowning in skill sets and they can't do it, and then you run out of time because the school year starts. And once the school year starts and you're trying to do marching, it's just, it's hard to have the same level that you do in the summer if you're doing band camp stuff. So yeah, I mean, it is a challenging thing to balance that. But I think it really comes down to like communication with the band director and the percussion director, and knowing, like watching videos of the group and having them send me stuff, and like trying to get a feel for like where the students actually are. And then like, cumulatively making sure that you're keeping track of like, okay, I there are plenty of spots that are easy throughout the show, and I have a couple of moments where I like make sure that like they're featured, and they maybe have more of their like technical difficulty, but like other parts of the show where they're not featured, like we don't have to do too much. Like we want to keep them interested, we want to keep them involved, but like, unless it's like a group of rock stars that we know are all like amazing world-class talents, like we try to not do like try to not overload them, because they can backfire with young students. So
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point, especially those young students. I think, well, high school, like, especially even more than some of the independent groups, like the gap between your senior
oh
and your
yeah,
freshman is pretty insane.
massive.
Like,
Yeah.
even in the same section, um,
Oh yeah.
trying
Yeah,
to
you're
write
asking
for,
them to play the same part, like if it's a wind part, like you're asking them to play the same part, and it's like that's a big gap, So like if you give them too much of that, like over the course of the show, like, if you think about it in like these small segments, like isolated, like maybe that's not that hard, but then like if you stack it all up, like that's what makes it hard. Stacking all that stuff together, like, okay, for like that wind person, like they've got to march, they've got to know their drill, they've got to remember their whatever, they've got to remember all of this visual stuff plus their music stuff. It's like, and if they're young, like it's just a lot. And really, you don't get credit for the harder you do things. Like you do if you do them really, really well, but like the worst thing that you can do is give a group something that's way too hard for them, or like a good bit too hard for them, and then just watch them struggle with it, like in doses for sure. Like you want to push them, you don't want them to just be, you don't want to like sandbag and do things that are way too easy for them to like get more points or whatever, but like, I think it's worse to watch them struggle. And it most of the time it burns them out. They're bummed because they're like, they struggle a lot and they don't enjoy it. And then it's like, why am I doing this? None of my friends are doing this. Like they're all, they get to hang out during Friday football games, and I'm here struggling with this music and this, so I want to just make sure that I'm like not contributing to that, because that's like my biggest fear, is like pushing kids away from the activity that like I love so much and that like I grew up in, like because of, writing them too hard of stuff, because of like
right.
some, like I want to play this, like this is really cool. Like that's not about me. You know what I mean? It's like I tell this to my groups all the time. It's like I may write the music, but like as soon as I deliver it, like it becomes yours. Like it's not mine anymore. Like it's not my show. Like you're performing it, you're teaching it every single day. Like you are way more in it than I am, because I've got a bunch of other groups. I'm on to the next, and it's not that I don't like check in or pay attention, but like, like that's your show and you live with that show all the time. So like, it's, I just want to make sure that I'm not contributing to like it becoming, like a negative thing.
Right. Well, and I think, and I think this is a good thing, but I think students now are just really aware of, am I having a good time? Am I having a good experience? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is the amount of time I'm investing in this versus the reward I'm getting out of it, like, are those equal, or ending up in my favor? And I think that's different even from when I was younger, like go through
Absolutely.
school. And it's like that at all levels. It's like that in high school. It's like that in drum corps and WGI. I think just students, members now are just really aware of, I'm putting a lot into this. Like I deserve to get a lot out of this
Yeah.
too. And
Yeah.
the
I
design,
want to be able to like have fun, and and that's the thing. It's like that gets back to like what you were talking about before with like different goals. And that's what like when like some of the best band directors like differentiate those goals. They have different sets of goals. Like some of them can be competitive, but like, a lot of them can just be about like the experience and the journey. And I know it's cliche, but it's like it's a, it's more about the path than it is the destination and all of that. But like that's so true. And like, students can still gain a lot out of that, like even with like medium competitive success along with that, like I think I think that's where like those like really good band directors like continue to challenge them, continue to find different ways to find successes, and acknowledge that throughout. And then I think, then it doesn't always have to be about scores, it doesn't always have to be about that, because it's, some of that's completely just like out of control. It's like you're not really, those students aren't really in control of that. So, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree that it's gotten much more open about that. And I think that it is a good thing. I do think that is a good thing.
Okay. Well, kind of going in a different direction, kind of back to some of the more design related stuff we were talking about
Mm-hmm.
earlier on. Talk to me a little bit about how the sound design has changed from where you started till now. Sort of from an outside, this seems like the thing that has changed the
Yeah.
most. Like front ensemble
Well,
is still kind of
yeah.
front ensemble, but the electronics, the like complexity that goes into that really feels
Yeah.
like the last 5 years, 10 years has exploded.
Yeah, it's gotten pretty crazy. It's definitely grown a ton in like even like you said, the last like 5 years. I think the biggest thing for me that I think is like seems to be the how it's integrated within the overall design, and how many more people are just doing sound design. And I started out kind of just doing front ensemble, and then it kind of became sound design also, as I started to just kind of like, one, learn that it was a need, that people wanted it. I found it, I was able to market myself to be able to do both. That helped me like grow my client base, because it was a more like, it was more incentive, I think, like to hire me, because I could do the front ensemble and the sound design together. But now, like, like there are plenty of programs in the country that just do sound design. And like I have started, even within the last like 2 or 3 years, like I started only doing front ensemble, where that then they hire a sound designer also. And not every client, but like some clients that I'll get hired at a group, and I'm the new piece, and I get hired to do like full percussion, but they've got a sound designer already. So like I kind of fit into a different piece of the puzzle that like others do. But like I think that's great that like people are growing as sound designers too, like to create and provide that kind of integration. And like every show is different, no matter what the designer is. Like you could be the best designer in the world, and if the people that are designing the show don't leave the space for it to be integrated, if they don't allow that person to kind of like do what they do best and be creative in the space, then it can feel limiting a little bit, just like any other designer. Like if you don't let the percussionists, like if the wind person has, if it's too complex and there's not enough space, like it's going to feel like the percussion's an afterthought. If you put the winds and the percussion together and there's no space for sound design, it's going to feel like that's an afterthought. It's not going to feel like that's like equally contributing. And like I think more and more people that know about it, and through social media and all of these other like groups and things like that, of like all of these really awesome people that do sound design, and really awesome like people that are really invested in that. I think it's becoming more and more apparent that like integrating that within the design is really important. And it's not just all bass drops and boomers, but it's like like you can really enhance a product with sound design, and with really expert, just like any other element of this. Like if you've got like a guard designer that knows the colors of the flags, and like you see them move, and like they just know that looks really good, and that's going to look really good for this group, and that's going to sound like the wind person knows what key and what range, and like okay, like this combination of intervals is really going to make them sound bigger, like all of that stuff. Like it's the exact same process for sound design. And I think that it's exciting for me that it's continuing to grow so much, and that there are plenty of people that do great work that like just do that, like. And a lot of times they go in and they started as, rarely have I found that they like went to school to be like a sound designer. You know what I mean? Like rarely does that the way that it kind of is. Most people started the way that I started, where you were a pit tech, or DCI just started adding synths within the last 10 years. So maybe you played synth and you realized that, like you had to be thrown in the deep end of like learning how to do all of this stuff, like in a drum course setting or in a high school band setting or whatever. And like, you kind of learned along the way that like it can be really valuable and like do's and don'ts and all that kind of stuff. But, there are plenty of people that have learned how to do it, like from like learn how to be a sound designer and like, taking classes and like, writing scores for movies and all that kind of stuff. But like, a lot of people just have learned through the activity and have turned that into a career, which is exciting. It's exciting that there's opportunities continuing to grow for that. But yeah, it's definitely grown a lot in the last like 5 or 10 years. Really, the last like 5 years, it's really exploded.
Right. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes next. Like I think you look at like front ensembles and batteries now, and like there, you can see the progression of like all of a sudden it's like people that figured it out, people that got taught by the people that figured it out, and now people that are like generation 3, generation 4, like
Yeah.
the way it's always been kind of students that are just like adding things on top, and it'll I think design, like sound design especially, is kind of just still in that first second, like people have
Yeah.
kind of figured it out, but like now it's the people learning from the people that figured it out. And
Yeah. And I think with anything, like percussion, like full percussion writing, and, like for a long time, it was, like it was based on drum set stuff, and you would just kind of be in the back and you would just kind of do your thing, and keyboards would play the flute line or whatever, and it was always just like, it was always just there as a very like afterthought supplemental. This is just a thing that, like, unless you're playing Porgy and Bess or something, you've got this like iconic keyboard line from a classical piece of music or like a Broadway tune or whatever, like it would rarely feel as like well produced and as integral as it does now. And that's kind of like sound design. Like sound design, some groups and some designers and like some projects allow for them to feel like, whoa, this is like a very, very produced thing. And I think a lot of the reason why, like, I think the next kind of like realm of it to take off is when the judges start to really recognize it and give it credit, because I think that that's probably like the thing that, not that it's held it back, but like I think that's the spark that's waiting, that it's waiting for to like explode like exponentially, is like for it to be we've seen some of it. We like the judges are instructed to like try to pick those things out, but like until a generation or until like multiple years of really doing that, like gets comfortable actually knowing what they're listening to and hearing it and recognizing like its value, I think that will be like the next catalyst to like shoot it, up the up the importance level for design teams around the country. Not that they don't now, but like I think that's like anything, like you just want to make sure that you get credit for it. You want to make sure that not only is it like a cool product, but like I think the credit drives a lot of the like necessity for it, and you'll see a lot more of it like in bands, and a lot of those talented people will be able to do more stuff, which is cool. So
right, yeah, it'll definitely kind of drive the investment in it, because right now it's easy for a band director to be like, well, I don't want to spend $1,000 on this, like 3 kids are going to
right,
play this, like
right.
3 synth players are going to do
Mm-hmm.
this, like um but I think that'll change, like you said, as it gets more
Yeah.
recognized and uh, so clearly affects more students. But
Well, and like like
um
band directors will watch other groups and like they will realize that they don't, their group doesn't have that, and they listen to it. It's like, why don't we sound like that? And it's like, well, you haven't invested in the sound design element of it. Like you don't have as well produced stuff. You don't have, whatever, like maybe it's the gear, maybe it's the actual design, maybe it's both. Like, this group has decided that they want to do that, that it's important to them, and you haven't yet. So like, do that. Here's some people that can do that for you, and that's how it goes. So
right. Well, and that's a perfect transition. So you work with a lot of band directors and a lot of percussion directors. Um, we'll start with the happy side of things. What are the things that the really good band directors, the really good percussion directors do when they're working with you, um, that make your job easier, that sets you up to give them a better product?
Yeah, for me it's communication. Like any other relationship and any other kind of, I mean, most things like in life are great because of great communication. Like whether any sort of relationship, no matter what the context. So for me, it's about communication between band director, percussion director, and me in terms of skill sets, like we were talking about before. Communication about deadlines, expected versus like and following up with checking in on things like that. Like I think for me it really helps to have people that understand sometimes, like I'm working really really hard on your product and I'm going to try to make sure that it's the best that it possibly can be, but like like sometimes like I have a plan and then it takes a little bit longer and then I am a day late or whatever, and I communicate like, hey, like I'm really really sorry, like this is gonna be a day or two late. One, or like my son got sick and he's it's been brutal, and like I work from home, and so he didn't go to school today, so who has to take care of him? Like those kinds of things, like understanding of that kind of lifestyle, that it's not as black and white. um but then like understanding those kinds of things, that's really helpful too. What was the other thing I was thinking about? I think it's important, the that the trust of percussion director, band director hires a professional designer to take care of things like managing the demand throughout the show, managing the skill sets throughout the show, managing things that like just are expected and accepted throughout. Like not trying to micromanage, not trying to um, be too picky about things, or like ask for specific thing, like not that you shouldn't ask for specific things, but I think like being really like some band directors can get a little too like neurotic about specific kinds of details that they want, where like I'm not going to do that. Like if I hire a plumber to come out and fix my, if I have like a pipe burst or whatever, like I am not going to sit over them and be like second guess every little decision they make, because they're the professional and I'm not. Like I've done some of that before. Like I know how a pipe works, but like if you've got a method that you do, like you're gonna do that, and I trust you. And if you get it to work, then that's great. Like so it's similar kind of a thing where it's like sometimes I feel like band directors get very, very intense. Where like, man, go, you got a million things to worry about. You're a band director. You got 1,000 things on your plate. You got a million kids that like every one of their parents needs something from you. You got 1,000 forms to fill out. You got bus requests. You got a, etc. Let me do this. Let me do this for you. You got to trust that I'm going to do a great job. If you've got issues afterwards, we can talk about it. But like, making sure that process doesn't get uh too micromanaged, basically. So that for me, like that's where like, and then band directors that are really great about paying on time, because I feel like sometimes, honestly, like I feel like sometimes band directors are very particular about the timelines of when they receive music, and then once that process ends, sometimes like I've found the band directors that are the most like rigid with the timelines are conveniently the least like worried about the timeline of paying. So like it just like it's one of those things where it's like I'm doing a job for you. Like let's I understand how it works. I'm really flexible with like the process of payment. I know every single school district is a little different. Sometimes it's boosters, sometimes it's through the school, sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. We need to pay after July 1st because of the fiscal, whatever. Like, just like, let's take care of it when it's supposed to be done. Basically, for me, it's like, I just, like, let's be transparent about it. Like let's make sure that we're, I'm taking care of my responsibility, you take care of your responsibility. So and then,
Right.
like I think, sorry, go ahead.
I was just kidding. I think every band director in history like underestimates the PO process.
Yeah,
Like the
exactly.
purchase order process always takes 2 weeks longer than you think it should.
And I don't super care about like, like I understand that, like I am not a stickler about, I am not like I'm gonna drop this client because they paid me away. Like I'm still waiting on fall checks. Like the fall season's been done for a long time, and like I understand, like I get it. Like I'm flexible with that kind of thing, but like it works both ways. You know what I mean? Like if you're like ultra rigid about some of this stuff and you're not understanding about certain things that happen in a person's life that allow for some flexibility, like, you know, it works both ways. And that's for me, like the thing that like I appreciate, that people that appreciate your situation, and like and understand that, like, I feel 10 times worse about being a day late to a project than you do about not getting it at the right time. I feel the weight of all the students and all of their, like, they were going to get better learning this music a day earlier and now they're not. And like I just, all of that guilt and anxiety like washes over me during that process. So, so I
Right.
think the band directors that are a little bit more like understanding of that process for the designers and like stay on them, and like it's a complimentary thing where like we both are communicating about it. We're both, like it's very like there continues to be open lines of communication, but like, understanding that we're humans. We have things that take too long, and we've got, things that sometimes get in the way, so yeah.
Right.
So that's a lot of
Well,
it,
and
like
the
about like not about like the actual like process, which is, I mean, but yeah.
yeah,
So,
makes sense. Well, the flip side of that, and I'm sure to a large extent the answer is like, well, the opposite of all that stuff.
yeah.
But what are the characteristics of whether it's band directors or percussion directors that are just harder for you to work with?
Yeah, I
Behaviors to
guess I kind
avoid.
of I guess I kind of answered it the opposite way, where I answered about the things that that like, if you please do these things to make it easier. Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it gets frustrating when we don't have a lot of information, like when we don't have a very detailed, like for me the most frustrating thing is to be given not a ton of information, create a product that I think is really good, and then either to be met with nothing and then not fired, but like moved on to somebody else the next year, like, or receive a bunch of criticism after the fact. For me, I think that's really frustrating, mostly because, or if I design a show and I do, like, I feel like I put everything I have into it, and then I see a video and a lot of it's changed or a lot of it's way different. Not because the students are playing it wrong, but because like someone went in and changed things. It's like, why? Like when I have a client and like I write a show, like I don't close the book on that until the season's done. You know what I mean? Like, is in terms of like if there's ever sort of like any sort of revision or anything that like a moment that gets changed or an idea that's like, or there's like, hey, let's do this, like I feel like I want to be a part of that process. Like that's kind of my job. And I, like there are reasons why I do things, and I, I want to make sure that like my work is reflective and everything that's done. And sometimes when clients do that, it just kind of, it's like I I'm with you through this process. Like you can reach out to me and we can talk about it. And I get sometimes like when you're in that position, sometimes the pit tech just wants to change things, and sometimes it's easier to just let them. And it's one less thing that you have to manage because you're managing a million things, and it's, October and you've got 3 weeks left in the season. You're just like, whatever, like, just, yeah, I get that. I totally get that. But like, it's still that process of like, it's still like someone's work, and, like it reflects on them. And like, there are certain things that are important to someone, and not even like it reflects on me poorly, but like I want to be a part of continuing that process with you. Like if you've got an issue with something, or if the pit tech has got a question or a thought about something, like let's have a conversation about it, at least so I'm like aware. Like I don't really, like there are times where, like I think back to like where I was as a pit tech, like if I had the opportunity to potentially like write a part of the show, or like at least like do something here and there that I saw, like maybe that would have impacted my career differently. Like maybe it would have grown some, like it would have, so like I'm open to those kinds of things in the right context. But like, again, it's just like, just talk about it. Let me know, like have that pit tech contact me. Like I'm not, I'm on my phone, I have Facebook, I've got email, like whatever, like you can reach me, like you don't need to, you know, you can reach me like instantly. So like, just let them know. And like, like I can help you with that. So I think that's probably like one of the number one things is like the being in the dark and then receiving criticism, or being in the dark and then being let go, and then maybe even hearing that like they didn't like the book or something like that. And it's like, well, just why didn't we talk about it? You know what I mean? Like, again,
Yeah.
just talk to me
Why?
more about it.
Yeah. It's like, why did you ride with it for 6 months?
Yeah,
Say
exactly.
something.
Exactly.
Um, all right. Last question. So for a young person, or maybe not a young person, but somebody that's looking into doing what you're doing, to being Matt Hahn, what resources are out there that they should be looking into, and where can they go to learn more?
Yeah. So I think, like I'm a part of a bunch of great Facebook groups with like arrangers and designers, and uh like the marching arts audio page is great for anything sound design related, or even just like audio tech related, whether that's like gear, or like the transparency of these groups right now is incredible. Like people are willing to do full video walkthroughs of their rigs, of drum corps and stuff, and you can learn a ton. And I think there are a lot of people that have come through the activity like I have, and want to give back to people that are starting and are open to that. So reaching out is a big one. Like I have had a bunch of people reach out to me, like, and just I have ongoing conversations with young up and coming designers about what they can do better. And when they get into situations, like I was just having a conversation tonight, like just we was asking about prepackaged shows, and like what some advice about stuff. And it's like I'm open to that all the time. Like I have no problem. I feel like no matter who it is, uh they're usually really open to like talking with young people. Like nobody's like, it's not some sort of like ego thing. So I guess some people do, but like I personally, like I am open to talking with whoever. I know Kevin Shaw is really open to talking with people too. There's a bunch of people on the Ian Grom is really good about that too. Like there's a lot of people in the activity that like are invested in helping others get better at what they do, and are willing to you know have conversations just like this about things like that. So for me, I would say like get involved in those groups, and read a lot of, there's always like, it basically turns into a forums page where like a post happens and then there's a bunch of people that comment on it, and it's great, it's awesome, it's really insightful and really helpful. And there's stuff throughout the years back that's really helpful in terms of like acquiring gigs and like getting better at that. Like I think we were talking about it, like about like doing really good work is the best possible thing that you can do. I think a lot of people have started the same way that I did, where like you just try to adopt a group, and like whether they're like, especially a group that like maybe isn't very good, that needs some help, and you make them better, and you keep making them better, and you keep growing it, and you write for them, and you grow, and you allow your product to enhance them, and your teaching to enhance them, and then that can enhance you, and like just it works both ways, and it allows for your product to be shown in its like truest possible form, which is like, for me, like as an educator, like I like I've always been the most happy with like when I've been able to like be that person, like really hands on, just because it's so different, it's just like my thing. And like, so I think, being really hands on with a group is really helpful early on. Or early on, I did a lot of like cold calling. I would email a lot of people and ask if I could, like, and a lot of people, like, I looked up band director lists and stuff like that, and that was probably like not cool of me, but like like I was able to, I maybe got one or two gigs out of it or whatever, but like, it was mostly through my network, like of people that I knew that like were friends of mine, um, that allowed for me to kind of grow that, and then just doing really really good work, being really easy to work with too is a big one. Not not being not having an ego about your process, and being really open to communicating well with band directors, I think is a huge component of it. Because not that band directors don't know what a good design versus a bad design is, but I think that a good relationship goes a long way to maintaining that client, and like and keeping that client as a recurring relationship and something that you build and grow from. There are certain clients that I have that I've been writing for 8 to 10 years now because of relationships, and that's the most important thing. And sometimes they change, and sometimes band directors leave and you lose that client or whatever, but like you have to just make sure that you do whatever you can to make sure that that relationship is really important and really strong, and then also back it up with trying to hit your deadlines and being transparent and communicating and doing good work that makes the students sound better and makes them gets noticed by them or by other teachers or things like that. So it's kind of like it's a bunch of little things all together that create that like success, I think. But like being skilled at like crafting a musical package that works well, that like makes students sound really good, and then all of that other like professionalism business stuff of like handling clients and being a people person and like like interfacing. And you don't have to like, you can be introverted, but like as long as you like work well with people, even if it's just via email or via text message or whatever, if that's your preferred method, just communicate and be open, and like be like a part of the team. And that really helps, I think, like make it feel like you're there with them and you're not just like nameless faceless designer that sends in music and then that's it and cashes the check. I think that's like a huge part of it.
Right. Well, especially when you're like a young new designer. I mean, any band director that hire someone that's like on their first gig, on their like first couple gigs, like they know there's going to be stuff that isn't refined, isn't
Yeah.
perfect, and um, but they're choosing to go with you anyway. So there's,
Yep.
but it's hopefully because of that relationship. So if you're not doing that part of it, then
Yeah.
you're probably not going to keep that gig for very long.
Right. And hopefully that means like, if you're young and they're taking a chance on you, you're really involved, as involved as you possibly can be with them, reacting to videos, reacting to judge feedback, like all like whether you're like there at every single thing or whether you're there at some, sometimes you can't be at every single thing. Like there's no way that I could be at every single thing for all my clients or listen to every single judge tape. You know what I mean? Like there's just no way. But like if you have one client or three clients and you can be really like interactive, like that can help overall like grow that. And it's not possible to obviously replicate that for 20 people, but like it can at least like create that like lasting kind of success that I think is important.
Gotcha. Well, Matt, thank you so much for talking and sharing some of your knowledge about design, about professionalism, about owning a business. I appreciate it, and thank you for taking the
Absolutely.
time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.